You're listening to Expat Radio. I'm Bill Anderson. I'm coming live from the Costa del Sol, and I'm delighted to welcome my guest for today, Brian Hayhurst. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you for that introduction, Bill. And I must ask, first of all, is your DJ from Yorkshire?
Oh, I think that might get you into trouble. He's from Manchester.
I must say, music sounds good and got a great voice too. Well, thank you for bringing me on, Bill. It's a pleasure. What a privilege to be with you.
Listen, Brian, what has surprised me in some ways with doing this show, and mainly with people from the Costa del Sol, um, is what varied lives people have had before they ended up here or retired here. And you haven't exactly been a sort of civil servant sitting behind the desk pushing papers for 30 years, have you?
No, indeed. No, I've had an extremely varied life, tons of massive ups and some desperately big lows as well in my life. Had a good time, but and no regrets, mind you.
Yeah.
But it's been very varied.
And I'm trying to avoid the name Huddersfield, but is that where you're from?
Of course, it's the home of Harold Wilson, Anita Lonsborough, Derek Ibbotson, and what's it, James Mason, the actor. Remember all
All
those
right,
people?
yeah.
And lots of other famous people.
Right, so that is your sort of home ground is Huddersfield, yeah?
It is Huddersfield. That is my hometown then, 20 odd years ago, and that's where I was born.
Yeah, and we will come round to talking about that you still have connections there, but we'll do that a little bit later. Let's talk
Yep.
about you in your early life. First of all, Brian, I've got a note that you trained as an electrician. Now, was that your first kind of career?
It was indeed, yeah. From school, I finished up being an apprentice electrician with the YEB. Would that sound familiar? Electricity Board.
Right, okay.
I got through the certificates, and it earned me quite a lot of money actually, with a bit of scotching and private work. Plus, of course, enjoyed working at the YEB. It was good fun.
Right, okay. So that was that. And when did I have to say this, you are a former international gymnast. When did that start, Brian? And how did these two things go
That's
together?
true. Bill, it's amazing. Have been here so many years now. Very rarely mention my sport because people would think, oh, he's just blowing his own trumpet. But yeah, I had an illustrious career in artistic gymnastics, master
Right,
six apparatus, pommel horse, parallel bars, all that stuff for about 20 years, actually.
right, okay.
Finished up doing a bit of coaching and finished up also announcing at big events too. Sport's been my life.
Right. But this kind of sport, and certainly if we go back a few decades, you didn't get rich off it, did you?
Not at all. It cost me a lot of money. The boys today quite well deserve it, mind you. Are funded, a government funded lottery. They're given clothing, food, sustenance. They don't have to work like I did, like we all did. It was our
Right, yeah.
savior, really. That's the only way we could earn money.
So how did you manage your work as an electrician, your sort of weekend jobbing, and the training which inevitably had to go into this?
That is such a pertinent question. That's a question that all the gymnasts I worked with had to do. They were either in industry or commerce, and they had jobs to keep to fund. Fitting in a very small school hall in a place called Milnesbridge, where all the mills were,
Right,
a school hall there, which actually attracted many champions in Huddersfield. And in fact, it reared three Olympians and five or six internationals in a small hall,
right,
which we could use twice or three times a week if we were lucky.
right. So tell me what you mean when you say international. What kind of avenues were open to you that made you an international gymnast?
You got picked if you were lucky in the top six. It was a tough game. Staying at the top in any sport is hard.
Sure.
Uh, Unfortunately, in Yorkshire, there were two guys there alongside me, Mike Booth and Stan Wild, who became British champions in the same squad, fighting for those cherished two, three, four, or five, if you were lucky, six places, which
Right.
which enabled us to travel um, all around Europe, basically.
Right. Okay. So you got invited to international competitions, which you probably had to pay for yourself.
Actually, the airfare was paid for, but and clothing too was given.
Right,
Yeah, while we were there, we lived with the host country, whether it's a world championship or an international comp. But around Britain, traveling around Britain, you had to do it yourself. You had to find your own way,
right.
drive there, drive back, or find your own accommodation. It was
Yeah.
tough.
But petrol wasn't nearly £2 a gallon in those days.
That's true, true. But I have to say, I did meet some absolutely fabulous people in the gymnastics game.
Right,
Real comics, the Army boys, people from Birmingham and the Northeast, some superb guys who I'm still in contact with and are still very close friends.
right. So you were saying that there were about what, 4 or 5 disciplines that you had?
Yes, six actually.
Or six, okay.
Floor, floor exercise, you know, the thing you run and do somersaults on floor.
Yeah, yeah,
The pommel horse, the hardest, where you swing around and do various maneuvers. The toughest one, that I reckon, it was for me anyway. Floor
right.
pommels. Rings, everybody says, are you good on ropes? The rings were the timber rings, which you do, as you can see now, it's most incredible stuff being done.
Yeah,
Floor pommels, rings, parallels, and high bar, and vault. There's a vaulting horse
and
too, but
vault,
that's six.
yeah. Listen, as far as the rings are concerned, I don't reckon I could just hang on to them for any more than about 5 seconds, let alone do all these
Join the club.
maneuvers.
I would have difficulty too now. It was hard.
Yeah. Well, but what about injuries and things, Brian? How did that work out? Or were you fortunate that you didn't have these injuries?
You're asking absolutely the right questions. It's just amazing. I mean, I've got all sorts of ideas, but you're bringing them out from me. Injuries were a big problem. In the early days, matting was hard to come by.
Right.
Today, they have foam pits, special mattresses to land on, safety rigs, harnesses. None of that. If we flew off the high bar and landed perfectly, that was a handshake. You know, it was a, well done, boy.
Yes.
You were lucky. It was tough, and there were, as you can imagine, Bill, lots of injuries too.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you must see the changes in the whole gymnastics world. I have a German friend who's getting elderly now. He's about 80, and he showed me a photograph from when he was a young man, and he was doing well. He calls it ski flying. You know, when they go down the side of a mountain and fly off with the skis, and he had won some competition, but the photograph in the front of the newspaper showed this young German guy with a hand knitted sweater, a full neck shirt, and a tie on, you know?
This was a serious competition,
Oh,
was
it's a
it?
serious competition, yeah. But that was it. He's 80 now, so we're probably going back 60 years, and you're talking about the changes in equipment, and it just sort of sprung to mind how I
True.
guess all of these kind of really demanding sports, the changes
Mm,
have been quite dramatic.
incredible. The equipment's changed radically. The parallel bars, for example, are a lot springier now.
Right.
The floor exercise is padded. No one could possibly do a triple somersault on an ordinary floor.
Okay.
In our little school hall, we had what we called a thin rectocell mat with maybe an agility mat if you're lucky, or a coconut mat. Remember those
Oh, that
in
sounds
school?
fun. Yeah, that sounds
And you'd
fun.
be running down the hall and try and avoid the far corner, which was not far away. Try and do even a single somersault, but we managed. We managed. It was
Yeah.
good fun.
So you had quite a lot of fun in this whole world, even though, as you've said, Brian, it was kind of a tough world, and I'm in my 60s, but I knew some Olympic, for example, boxers, and they were
Mm.
having to this is probably in the 1970s, they were having to pay their own way to go to tournaments, and then I think obviously going to the Olympics was a bit different, but on the day to day to get their name there in lights, they were working really hard and doing this in their free time.
Sure. Such a lot landed on the family. If you had family, you had that to sort out. You perhaps had HP on a car or a mortgage to pay if you're
Absolutely.
lucky or unlucky. But generally speaking, if the will was there, you'd have a crack. and you wanted to improve if you could.
Yeah. But you didn't stay with being an electrician, did you? You kind of made another life choice.
Well,
I'm not very sure when this was, but
the
you went into
each year
working.
the, the gymnastics finals preliminaries were held in big halls like Crystal Palace, for example. In
Right.
'65, I'd finished and done very well at that competition. And the PE advisor from London came up to me and said, "Brian, I've got just the job for you."
All
I
right.
said, "Well, I'm working. I'm an electrician." "No, as a youth worker."
All
Wow, I
right.
thought, interesting. From a sparky to a youth worker. And I said, "What's the procedure?" Long story. I finished up working a new youth centre in Penge.
Right.
God, it was so difficult. I didn't know anyone. Expensive, very small wage. Then I dropped a lot from being a sparky,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of drugs. Unfortunately, the kids were very difficult to work with, and I had no experience. I was inexperienced, unqualified youth worker.
Right.
And the principal youth officer came up and said, "Brian, if you want to be seconded," I said, "What's that, seconded?" "We can move you to a college. You can become qualified. If you wish, come back." Wow, send me. So I did. I finished going to Leicester, became qualified. And believe it or not, the job that came up on offer was the very youth club I was brought up in Milnes Bridge, Huddersfield, Crow Lane Youth Club. And I
Right.
became the youth leader of my old club. What an absolute it was a wonderful time.
Yeah, but it's what you're saying. Being a youth worker, it sounds, I don't know, maybe it sounds to some people like a kind of soft option, but it's nothing of the sort, is it? It's hard work.
Well, enabling youngsters to do, say more or less what they want, but giving them chances to do what they want can be a bit daunting, particularly if, again, you've got a limited funding. Music, fun, laughter, games, tests, sport, of course, cross
Yeah,
country, running, netball, football, cricket, offer those situations for the majority. There were some that didn't want to do anything, just sit and listen to music. But generally, the club was great. Going into that easygoing situation from London was such a dream for me.
yeah,
And they spoke my language.
yeah. But as an electrician, you can finish a job. You start off with a new installation, or you start off with I don't know, a failure somewhere, and then you walk
Yeah,
away from that thinking that's the job done.
sure. Pack
And
up, sweep up, and go home. Youth work, it's always there. Yeah.
yeah, because the thing is, I did a lot of work. Well, for 5 years, I managed a rehabilitation unit for women with drug problems,
Mm.
and it was probably about 2 years too many. But but the thing that struck me, and it happens for people working in the youth services, is like what you come back to in the morning is not necessarily what you left at night.
Very true. Yeah. I think most of the kids that I dealt with in Huddersfield were very appreciative of the club. Nowadays, virtually every club has closed down. There isn't one. I don't think there's one youth club in Huddersfield. In those days, in the 60s, 70s, every club was bursting at the seams with youngsters.
Yeah.
And it was good. And the interaction between clubs was great.
So what was the key focus? What was it? The interaction thing, socializing? Was it
Yeah.
getting people opportunities that they didn't think they could have, or what would you say was your main focus in working in youth
You
work?
said it all. I think it encapsulated all those things. And being someone who could talk to the kids,
Yeah,
offer them your support, your advice, information. If they want to go in a certain direction or they're in trouble,
yeah,
maybe you can give help and advice there. Uh, just be available for them, really.
right. I remember one of the hardest questions that I was ever asked when I was going working in these social type services was, what is your success rate? I'm sure you were asked that kind of question.
I've never been asked because I wouldn't know how you'd measure it really.
Yeah,
You could tell in the kids' faces the fact that they're knocking on the door to get in at 6 o'clock. or
Right.
5:30 or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's the queuing a long while to get in, you know that you've been fairly successful. If there's no one there, I'd get really worried.
Right.
And every night was difficult getting them all out to go home 9, 10 o'clock.
Sure.
Uh, it was just great fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, why did you leave it, or what happened? Because this moved on to a new
You, you,
career break, didn't it, Brian?
you've given this a lot of thought, haven't you? Well,
Yes.
I was in the youth work for about 18 years actually. I ran 2 clubs. We moved to Paddock because the explosion of gymnastics happened in '72 with the Munich Olympics and Olga Korbut. We
Right.
were flooded with kids. The school hall, they were queuing to get into the hall, talk about doing gymnastics. It was impossible. And of course, with girls' apparatus and men's, there was no room whatsoever. So
Right.
we lived in the village itself in Paddock, and suddenly a local pub came available up for grabs.
Right.
Never known anything about pub work, and I tried to get a book from the library. No, lad, we don't have any books on pubs. You'll have to go to your landlord. Go and talk to a landlord.
Right. Right.
So we applied for the job amongst lots of other people. And after a lot of interviews and experience work, we finished up. I had to confront the principal youth officer, John Wood, a great friend of mine. I said, I'm leaving the youth service, John, after 18 years. What are you going to do? I'm going to run a pub. Well, he nearly fell off his seat. He said, do you mean it's alcohol, smoking, noise, racket? I said, it's an opportunity, John. I just want to take it.
Yeah,
Patted me on the back. We shook hands and it was all over. That was in '85 and we were in the Angel in Paddock for 10 years.
right.
Then we took 3 other pubs and a cabaret bar in Benham Mariner, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
we're going to come
Just
back to that.
loved work.
We're going to come back to that. Yeah, I know a lot of people who have come to Spain with young families, and their dream is to have a bar.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
but you'd already had the experience in the UK. How hard was it to be a pub landlord in the UK? And then we'll come on to the Spanish side a bit later.
Uh, in the UK, it was basically for me work every day, all day. Even your night off, you might get a call. You have to call for something, get some change, soft drinks or something. Uh, that was the thing, and you'd be working till midnight at least, clearing away, getting everything sorted out. So it was
Yeah,
it was the long hours that were the killer.
sure.
But again, with some good help, some great staff, some good managers, manageresses, and we still keep in touch with those too. We have a good record with them,
Yeah.
good rapport.
You must have some stories to tell about being a
Oh,
pub landlord.
hundreds.
Have you got any that are decent enough to tell?
I'd like to listen to yours as well.
Oh yeah, well I haven't been a pub landlord, but
Yeah.
I'm not a big pub person, especially down here because if my wife and I go out, we kind of like generally going to quiet places, you know, where we can sit and have a proper conversation, or if we're with friends that we want to be able to sit and talk to. And an awful lot of the pubs down here don't really give you that opportunity. Music for me, I know it's great for some people, it's just too loud. If I've got to shout at the
Mhm.
person next to me, then for me the music's too loud. And then there's the things that happen when people get drunk, and all this other.
Well, tell me about it.
No, you tell me about it.
Oh, honestly, Bill, we have seen Elaine and I, my wife Elaine, and I have seen people coming into all pubs,
Yeah,
smartly dressed, collar and tie, carrying a briefcase, perhaps having had a meeting, leaving in a sensible way, but you can really tell they've had a great night and they change completely.
right,
Uh,
right.
not many get aggressive, but sometimes you have to gently say, "Well, I'll see you tomorrow, mate. Goodbye."
Yeah, but I guess that is something you had to learn because aggression often creates more aggression. And
Mm,
then, you get into this really nasty cycle of people, falling out with each other and whatever. But I guess even your work in the youth services kind of taught you how to manage aggression and how to deal with it.
sure. Bill, you're asking absolutely the right question because it followed on. I mean, John Wood said, "Are you sure you're making the right decision?" But I'd been working with all these youngsters for such a long time. The
Yeah.
biggest problem then in the village, a very close-knit village, was that the kids had been in the youth club wanted to come in the pub
Ah,
at 15,
yes.
16-year-old. And I had a choice to make. Do I stay friends with them? Do I break the law? Do I soft drinks? Okay. Oh, come on, Brian. You know me.
Yeah.
We to make a compromise. And they steadily got older and they finished up having their 18th there and the 21st and the weddings and you name it.
Right, right. Yeah, the whole age thing is very complicated, and I think it's even more complicated in England than it is in Scotland. There are different licensing laws. So in
Mm-hmm.
Scotland, a 14-year-old can go into a pub if accompanied by an adult, and it's a place that serves food, for example.
Yeah.
And I think, certainly going back to that period, it was much tougher, wasn't it, in England in terms of the licensing laws?
Yes, it was. We left the pub trade just just before the no smoking finished, the ban on smoking in
Right.
pubs.
Yeah.
And it absolutely crucified some small pubs. One would have been and was actually one of our pubs, which was a good local meeting point for guys who like to have a cigarette, play dominoes, etc.
Yeah.
And it definitely crucified a lot of pubs, without a doubt.
Yeah, sure.
Not that I would have bothered, because I mean, every night we had to wash all our clothing immediately, wash our hair. You're smelling of smoke wherever.
Yeah. But listen, Brian, I did a lot
Can't
of
hear you,
work.
Bill.
I did a lot of,
I've
oops,
lost you.
hang on, hang on. I did a lot of work in social services. And I remember sitting in the director of social work's office in places like Castlemilk on the outskirts of Glasgow and not being able to see the people sitting across from me because everybody was smoking.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is going back into the 80s. So, even in these places where you would think that they would have kind of tighter rules, um, you know, like I didn't smoke in those days. So it is like you come out stinking of smoke and everything had to go hang up
Sure.
on the line when you got home.
Yeah. Do you smoke now, Bill?
I do. I started smoking when I was 50. Silence.
Oh, not long ago then.
Ha 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 ha. Longer than you think, Brian. Longer than you think. Hey, listen, just while we're talking about all of this, um, what do you think of the latest announcement from the Spanish government that all new cars, and I think it's as from next month, should have
Yes,
a breathalyzer linked to the starting button?
sure. It's going to be tamper-proof apparently, and you can't start the car if you're anywhere near the limit. And um, my thoughts are, well, living in Spain, and I must admit, just occasionally, I do I do occasionally have a little drink and come home in the car, but
Yeah,
it's not much. Um, it'll be interesting, Bill, to see the sale of cars during this month up to July. New
right.
cars
New cars,
before
and then
before the device is fitted.
and then the sale of older cars after
Yeah,
July. Yeah, I mean it's. I don't think any of us would argue that drinking and driving is not a good thing. Oh, sorry, is a good thing. We wouldn't argue that. But
no,
there is a culture in Spain that people will go to the ferias, the fiestas. They will drink and they drive home, and you see very few controls like breathalyzers around these feria grounds, and it's like you know that these people have been drinking for 2, 3, 4 hours, but you don't see
yeah,
the controls around very often.
I know it's difficult. It's a difficult one because Spain's just such a jolly place, and people have such a lot of fun and seem to want to have a drink with it.
Sure.
But the police at the entranceways to the ferries, as you know, all they want to do is clear the traffic and get you moving. Come
I
on,
know.
guys, move on.
I know. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see what
Mm,
happens with all of this. And
sure, it
Brian, we're
will.
going to take a short break for the sponsors and some ad breaks,
Yeah,
and then we'll be back to talk a little bit more about your move to Spain. Okay?
thank you. Look forward to it, Bill. Thank you very much.
Welcome back. You are indeed listening to Expat Radio. I'm Bill Anderson, and my guest today is Brian Hayhurst. Brian, you've had a pretty varied life. As I say at the beginning, I said you weren't a kind of
I
civil
thought you were going to
servant.
say I'm pretty.
I'll have a
Well, your DJ would agree. I
I,
ain't
I,
pretty.
I'll have the conversation about that one later, Brian. So you had been electrician, international gymnast, youth worker, and then you decided to go into the pub trade.
Yep.
So what happened between your three pubs in the UK and Spain? How did you end up down here?
You're amazing. How on earth do you think about all these questions? um, Actually, in 1985, Elaine and I decided to take a trip down to watch her son play keyboards in a big hotel where he had a contract.
All right, okay.
1985, not young, quite a young lad, and we drove in a taxi right the way down the coast beyond Estepona. Never been before. We immediately got hooked on Spain. We liked the climate, everything that people do come over here for.
Right.
And from that point on, we decided to start looking. Then we went into the pub trade, which earned us a little bit of money. We were able to raise enough to think about buying a small one-bed apartment, then a two-bed and a penthouse. And that's where we finished up in Riviera del Sol. You'll know that, of course.
That sounds very posh, doesn't
And,
it? Riviera del
we had that
Sol.
for, yeah, quite a number of years.
Yeah.
Then we decided to sell the penthouse. And, well, I wish I'd never done it, but I persuaded Elaine to build a house, to build a villa.
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
boy. Big mistake,
Uh,
huge mistake.
yeah.
It was, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I
No.
must
It's
tell you
it's
that
it's fine. But
the house
please
that was
go.
built by a bogus builder from England, we got the wrong contract. He did a really poor job. The architect came on site. We got it to the first floor, condemned it, and we had to demolish it and have it
Oh my
rebuilt
God.
by a Spanish family. Oh my God, we were pretty low on funds there anyway.
Yeah.
This was a killer. It really did affect us a lot.
Sure.
And had it not been for good friends of Alan and Elaine Conroy, who let us stay in their house nearby and look after the animals whilst they were away, we'd
Right.
never have survived.
Right.
We
And
stuck it out and we rebuilt it. And the villa was built,
properly.
yeah, properly. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, what you're describing is not just a one-off situation. This kind of thing does happen. We had a couple of weeks ago on Ralph de Jong, and he's talking about the legality of properties and knowing what it is before you buy and what you can do and all of that sort of stuff. And this kind of thing that you described, and having to knock it down after, well, one, having this illusion about having your villa, and secondly about all the money that you'd spent in getting it to that point, it must have been just heartbreaking.
That's the only word you can come up with. We were just sickened, and no one would take it on board. The Spanish company that sold us the land eventually came back and said, well, we'll pull it down and rebuild it to the level it's at, but we
Right.
want X amount of pounds, euros, and 20% extra. Go
Right.
for it. Start tomorrow. So they did. They put it up. They did a great job, and we ran out of money. Then got a mortgage, etc., loans, and
Sure.
we did finish it off ourselves. Elaine and I worked very hard on it for 7 years, actually.
Yeah.
Brutal temperatures, you can imagine, but we got it finished off, and with some good times there, some nice parties and some splendid gatherings.
Right. I think this is one of the things that the Brits don't let go of when they come down here are the splendid gatherings. We like our
Yes,
splendid gatherings, don't we?
We do, and Elaine and I certainly did and do at the moment if we can get round to it. But yeah, it was a big part of our life, being in the pub trade, which was always busy with promotions and fun and music. It just came second nature to have parties quite frequently.
Yeah, and the area that you had the cabaret bar was in Benalmádena. For people who don't know where it is, it's kind of between Fuengirola and Torremolinos. It's right on the coast, isn't it? And an
Yeah,
enormously popular place for tourists.
yeah. Lots of expats, tourists by the thousand, and we took a bar called Bar El Dorado, which was beneath them apartments, and we got it at a reasonable rent. To put some money into it, and it worked well for about 2.5 years, 3 years, and finished up moving from that and carried on with the villa. And then we sold the villa, and we now live in a lovely little apartment near Mijas Golf.
Right, right. So, did your bar have more locals using it, or was it really, did it really take off when the tourists came over?
The bar in Benalmádena,
Yes.
it had a regular crowd following a guy called John, who was phenomenal on keyboards, and all the, dare I say, silver tops like myself used to come and sing along with him.
Right,
And it was very popular, very much requested on the coast. And we were lucky because it brought in 50 or 60 or 70 people all
right.
wanted to sing live with John. And
Right.
that was one of the good things. He came twice a week. We had some good live entertainers. Is that my phone? No, can't be. I'm talking on it. Sorry, it's a wagon passing. Yeah, and yeah, there were lots of regulars, but we also, as you can imagine, got a lot of people wanting to come and see us from the pubs in England, but
Sure.
they didn't like the hill they had to walk up to get to it. But yeah, they found it. One guy said, "I've been looking for helado, bar helado."
Helado.
I said, "No, that's ice
That's-
cream." Oh, I said, "We've been looking." No, there were loads of them.
So you were named after the famous, if legendary place El Dorado, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah,
What is it, place of gold? Or yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it's the golden place basically.
the golden place. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
So,
was good. It was good to us, and again met some lovely people, some great staff, and no regrets on that one. It was an experience. Um, I suppose we could have managed without it, but we did it anyway. Two and a
yeah,
half, 3 years of our lives. Good experience.
yeah. Now, come on, Brian. Do the Brits on holiday deserve the reputation that they sometimes have? But I'm going to get you into
Well,
trouble for this one.
I, I know what you're seeking, but the majority of people the people that live here are just like us, I guess. Well, fairly well behaved,
Sure,
quite well behaved.
sure.
Uh, Particularly our age group anyway. But you see some of the youngsters who are having to be cautioned even at the airports, even if they get to the airport, or
Right.
being dragged off the aeroplane. Totally unfair to the country, and terrible example of British people. Um, Once alcohol hits the brain in certain circumstances, it can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, it can be. Listen, I remember being on holiday, I think it was in Corfu, and there were well, they were Scottish actually, but
Mm.
this guy was looking really damaged in the morning. If you get my tale.
Good word.
And he was saying to his wife, "Oh, you know, I think it's something I ate." And and she replied, "No, it would be nothing to do with the fact that you were lying flat out on the counter having Metaxa poured down your throat."
Well, I've seen that as well, as you can imagine, many times.
Yeah. Yeah, because people are inclined, and not everyone, because you know we have a lot of very good tourists that come over here, but people are inclined to do things here that they wouldn't necessarily do at home, aren't they?
Yeah, you do see some very jolly people. I think the majority of people we mix with or join up with are they're like a lot of fun and a lot of enjoyment, but I don't think they get out of hand. Never ever. I don't think I've ever seen a fight while I've been here.
Right.
Um,
But do you think
no, I haven't.
that was the type of business that you had that didn't necessarily attract the more problematic tourists?
Do you mean Ben Madina
In
or Huddersfield?
Benamadina, yeah, in Benamadina, you know, maybe this kind of business didn't necessarily appeal to the ones who just wanted to come and get drunk, you know?
No, it didn't. The one or two got a little bit inebriated occasionally and got a little bit loud, but generally speaking, no. We never had to put anybody out or quieten anyone down. It was quite well behaved, really. Bit
Yeah.
boring in a way, I suppose.
So you moved down to actually Mijas, which is our municipality in Riviera del Sol. You
Yeah.
had your business in Benamadina, which is what, about 30 kilometers away, 20
Yes.
kilometers?
And driving there and back every day was quite a nuisance, but we had to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah. And so why did you choose Mijas to live and Benamadina to work?
Good question. I don't know how Riviera came about. Oh, I know. We saw a promotion in Huddersfield, actually. A guy came along and said, "Oh, we're offering some properties in southern Spain. You might be interested to come and see it." And
Right.
it was actually around Miraflores, and
Uh-huh.
there was no narration to it. It was just guitar music and these beautiful. You can imagine they got the very best pictures of Miraflores,
Oh, yes.
and the circular building, they're all white. Wow, that looks really appealing. And we were immediately taken up, and we said, "Well, we're having another conversation." And he said, "We're having another meeting in a couple of weeks' time. If you're interested, we'll put you in touch with some of the agents." And it all happened like that. And
Right.
we put our name down and put a deposit down, I guess, a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Yeah, sure. But certainly in those days, I don't think Mijas was seen as the kind of place for, in those days, lots of live music and cabaret and you know, places just to go. They would say in Spanish, para copas, you know, for drinking. There are some of these places around in La Cala now, but they're very sensitively organized. And again,
Mm.
so you know, did you see more opportunity having your bar or cabaret bar in Benamadina?
Um, well, we took it over as it had some forms of entertainment, some tribute acts, some singers, groups,
Yeah.
and duos. Uh, but in the very early days, as you said, it was mostly flamenco,
Mm,
um, background music, quiet, the odd acoustic guitar with a singer, perhaps,
right. Yeah.
olives and grapes and things like that. But it's got become a lot more sophisticated. Of course, it's a lot more governed now, as you know. Sometimes bars get closed down because they're too loud,
Yeah.
overdoing it.
Yeah,
But
it's very
we've always
complicated.
liked live. We've always liked live music. Sorry,
Yeah,
Bill.
but it's very complicated nowadays. You know, people contact me on a regular basis saying, "Are we allowed to play live music?" And the straight answer is no, you can't, because they only give licenses for live music to places that are listed as bar music.
Music
And
venue.
yeah,
Yeah.
and not to, you know, a restaurant or whatever. But you know, people do put on live music, and there are not many problems, but they're also very sensitive about it, and you know that they're not damaging other people's businesses. But yeah, it's and you know, people on holiday like to come and listen to live music, don't they?
Yeah. I think they would only react to Guardia if they had several complaints or even one complaint
Yeah,
about noise or rowdyism or something.
yeah,
Then the police are automatically obliged to go in and say, "Look, show me your license." 300 euros, but
yeah,
they've made thousands while they've been playing it.
yeah,
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 I've seen them closing places down in Fuengirola, in the port there.
yes,
Some great bands, but the police have come along. Sorry, mate, got to close.
Yeah. And I know that this has happened in different parts of Mijas as well, in Mijas Pueblo, in the village, in some areas in Riviera. And it usually, as you say, Brian, comes about because somebody is put in a complaint, and then they have no choice but to act according to the law on that complaint. Yeah.
Mm.
Right. Listen, I run this by Dave and I run this by Alan Boardman, and you know what I'm going to talk about now. Huddersfield Town.
Uh,
What
what is it?
happened?
Oh, Huddersfield Town. Oh
What
my God.
happened?
Yeah. Well, they're still in the championship. Let's put it that way. Sad they just didn't make it with Nottingham,
Right.
beaten by Nottingham in penalties, wasn't it? Penalty shootout
I didn't
again.
see it, yeah. But I
Oh,
heard it
it's
was a bit
terrible.
I heard it was a bit emotional, Brian.
It was indeed, yeah. There was a lot of crying, not by me, but there was quite a few people extremely upset.
Any
Yeah.
Nottingham supporters round about you?
Uh, Not where I am in this lounge, but no,
I'm thinking about neighbours or
no.
friends then.
There was no bitterness. The team that scored the most goals in the end won the tournament, and that's what we have to stick with for another year.
Yeah. But the thing is, it feels worse the closer people get to success and then fail, isn't it?
Mm, yeah,
You know,
sure.
if you think they haven't got a chance, you're not surprised. But if you think, yeah, that they've got a chance here and it doesn't
Yeah,
happen for them, then they
sure.
can get really depressed about it.
Sure. It was sad in that they'd had such a huge build up towards the end of the season from pretty near the bottom of the table,
Right.
slowly started winning and drawing points in the table, and finished up in the top two. And no,
Okay.
not the top two because they were automatically in. In the playoffs, we were in the top two,
Right.
and sadly, we just didn't do it. So that's Huddersfield Town.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but listen, I've never been much of a football follower, but my family were, my father, my cousins, my brother, of Heart of Midlothian. And
Mhm.
I remember them literally coming home in tears because they had lost in a final. And I mean,
Mhm.
they were depressed for a fortnight, you know?
Yeah. Well, we have relatives in Edinburgh, and
Right.
they were big Hearts fans. Well, the kids were a bit younger,
Yeah.
and I get the impression that they've had a good season this time, haven't they?
I have no idea.
No,
All of
no.
my family that really followed it so closely are now sadly gone. So I don't really, I don't have TV at home, you see. So
No.
I don't really follow these things. Sometimes I get a notification somewhere on Google or on
They've
Facebook or
done
something
okay,
like
but
that.
they're not in the Are they in the Premiership? I can't remember.
I have
Anyway,
no idea. I have no
they've had a
idea.
better season.
How important is football to your life as a obviously a lifelong Huddersfield Town
Hmm.
supporter?
Huddersfield Town, it's on the back burner until the season begins.
Right.
I'm looking forward to the World Cup.
Uh-huh.
I watched a lot of the international events and some of the major Premiership games, but it's not my life.
No.
It's just in between the tennis, which I like, and of course any gymnastics that come on telly.
Right.
I like to watch the athletics, the Diamond League stuff, and I'm also trying keeping fit myself by doing a lot
Right.
of walking and working out.
Yeah.
So
So
sport generally.
one last thing, Brian, because time is rapidly going. You write a fortnightly article for the Huddersfield Hub.
Yeah, up
How
to
did that come
18 months
about?
ago, I'd never even heard of it. In fact, it was only created that time.
Right, so it's a
A guy called
new. Uh
Martin Shaw, who used to work for our local paper in Huddersfield, The Examiner. He was one of the top editors there, and he rang me one day and said, "Look, we're starting this new news feature. Would you like to write for us?" Because I'd written for The Examiner for 40 years, doing
Right.
gymnastics and other sports,
Okay.
and all sorts of things are coming on my screen. But anyway, he said, "Would you like to do it?" I said, "Cover what story?" He said, "Just tell me about anything that's going on in southern Spain, particularly Costa del Sol." Well, the range is so varied, as you know.
Yes.
But as you used to write locally, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's looking at something that people in Huddersfield might just find of interest.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because people might not be interested in some local mandate that's been passed down here, and they go, "Well, it's nothing to do with us." So actually choosing your topics
Mm,
must be a bit tough sometimes.
sure.
So
But
how
there's always something crops up. I mean, the laws are forever changing. The bureaucracy is incredible. It's a mountain to climb, but
absolutely.
it's a great place to live, and there's so much happening. If you want to write about it, it's a case of trying to make it interesting, I suppose.
Yeah. And then do you think that your article will encourage people to come down here on holiday?
Oh, nobody's ever said that. But I would think it can't dissuade them. I hope not. Anyway, that's not my ultimate concept of the job, but I
Right.
hope it does give some light onto it. If you're going to be going, I just want to say, if I may, take the
Yes, of
prerogative
course.
of welcoming Jeanette, Liberty, and Jordan, who have just come from Melbourne to stay with us here.
Wow.
They've just arrived recently. Safe journey. Glad you got here, and we'll see you in a very short while. I'm sure they're listening, you see.
Right. And they are family members.
Yes, it's a daughter-in-law and a daughter and a friend.
Right. Okay. So I think they're going to have, if they come from Australia, especially one of the sunny parts, the heat down here shouldn't
Sure.
affect them too much. It's people who come from, I don't know, Sweden sometimes that they find the heat just like a bit overpowering, you know,
They
or
just melt.
or from Scotland, I have to say.
Yeah. No, they're a horse riding family, very versatile and easily satisfied. We've got some things lined up. They're only here for a few days. They're
Right.
touring Huddersfield, Edinburgh, you name it. But anyway, we're looking forward to seeing them.
Nice, Brian. Well, our time is almost gone. I want to thank you for sharing, well, really, your life story with us. And it's been very
We've done bits of
interesting.
it.
Yeah, we've done bits of it, but you know, I said we'd be talking about life, and you've done that, and talking about changing careers, and you've done that, and then getting
Yeah,
into to the pub industry, which you have done as well. And I have to say, I think you have been terribly generous,
terrible.
ter terribly generous to some of the people that probably have caused a lot of problems off and on. But you're going to focus on the positive bit, Brian.
Yeah, yeah. Bill, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great fun, a lot easier and much more amicable than I thought. I hope people didn't think I was trying to blow my own trumpet. You asked me the questions, I tried my best to answer.
Yeah,
So, thank you again, Bill, and we'll meet again sometime.
indeed. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you to our producer, Dave, who has been remarkably quiet during this show.
It has indeed.
I'm
I
concerned
hope he's
about
not been
him.
too bored.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care, and I'll be back next week.